Maria has now strengthened to a Category 3 hurricane as it approaches those islands already battered by Irma. It's expected to strengthen further as it reaches near Puerto Rico, the Dominican Republic and Guadeloupe. Warnings are also in place for the British and US Virgin Islands, Dominica, St. Kitts and Nevis, Montserrat, Martinique and St. Lucia. The devastation from Irma stretches across the Caribbean. These images, filmed by a charity on the island of Barbuda, show the extent of the rebuilding job that lies ahead and the vulnerability to another storm. Hundreds of British troops have joined locals in that rebuilding effort, and the government, criticised for the speed of its reactions, says it's ready to respond further in the aftermath of Maria. It will be of little comfort that forecasters say the peak of hurricane season in the Atlantic has now passed. It's been a devastating one so far, and it isn't over. Greg Milam, Sky News, Washington.
Well, with me is Dr. Sean Campbell, Executive Director of the charity Samaritan's Purse UK, which has been involved in the relief effort following Hurricane Irma. Very good to see you, Dr. Campbell. Well, let's talk first of all, before we move on to what Maria might do. What have you been able to do to alleviate the effects of Irma?
Right now we have 5 aircraft in the region. We've flown in 136 tons of supplies as of today, and including a team of 40 specialized technical advisors. We have 3 desalination units there that are producing 10,000 liters of clean water, potable water every day. And we're concentrating on the areas that have been most affected. Barbuda.
Barbuda, right.
Right, and you know, trying to get everybody from Barbuda to Antigua, putting them in safety, and then looking at how we can build a camp back in Barbuda where these people can return.
Yeah. So
step at a time. Now with Maria,
well, this is the thing, isn't it? 2 weeks later, yes. Then we've got another one on the way.
Well, and maybe yet another one brewing.
Yeah.
So, you know, this is a unique year. I don't think we've seen this for a long time. Certainly hurricanes of this magnitude, we just haven't seen. So, and that's, of course, the fear, because once a hurricane hits and does the damage, the next big wind or hurricane that comes by, it just destroys. All the NGOs, we're in the same boat right now.
But I mean, some of the work, it obviously depends where it hits, but I mean, some of the work you and others have been able to achieve in the short period of time since Irma, I mean, that must be in jeopardy, given that, I suppose, the temporary accommodation you're putting up, some of these desalination plants, they're not going to actually be built to hurricane withstanding standards, are they?
No, and nobody anticipated this, but we'll hunker down like everybody else right now in St. Kitts, in the Turks and Caicos. Our staff are hard at work getting ready for there. We have a few, probably another 12, 48 hours before it'll hit those areas. So we continue to deliver relief supplies and stockpile aid in this area so that once these hurricanes do pass, of course, then we've got quick access to the people who need most help.
And do you deal with just the immediate aftermath? I mean, this desire, obviously, for food, water, medicine and accommodation, absolutely required. But of course, we're talking about years and years before societies can be rebuilt, before they can recover.
Well, if we go back to the cyclones and the hurricanes we've been involved in, or tsunamis for that matter, it's been a 5-year project for us in all these areas. Now, it might shorten the time being in the Caribbean, and the infrastructure is greater, the access to America and to relief supplies is easier than some of these other areas, but Haiyan and some of these other cyclones that have hit, we've been active for 5 years in some of these areas, and we don't anticipate being around any less of a time. We're going to be there for the long haul. We want the people to know in these areas that, we're going to be there. We want to support them in every way we can.
And as that rebuilding process takes place, are you able to build in resilience, as it's now being called?
Well, I think that's always the goal, isn't it? To make a society, make an area better able to withstand what comes next. And I think that, we could have said that all along the way, after Haiti, for example, the earthquakes there, how do we build in a plan that can prepare these people for the next time these things come along? But I think NGOs and governments, we're getting better at it. We've just got a long ways to go, but we plan on being there for a long period of time, and whatever we build, whatever we construct, has to be able to withstand what comes next.
And there's this awful, I suppose, cycle, isn't there, in that the poorer a community is, a country is, the less able it is to withstand, to deal with the initial problem, but then that also entrenches the poverty.
It sure does. I think that in these areas, I look at the British Virgin Islands, the U.S. Virgin Islands, the protectorates that are there, the territories that are there, and people look at them and say, well, they're an upper class people, they've got the resources to do it themselves, but there are a number of islands that just don't have that infrastructure. And I think it's incumbent upon NGOs, it's incumbent upon governments, and certainly the military in these situations, that when we go in, how do we help these people lift themselves out of this area? So that, I've always said poverty is a matter of choice, and these people have so few choices. So how do we help give them more choices, how to protect themselves and how to provide for themselves during these times?
Well, just back at you with that. How do you?
Well, I think that we've got to go in and we've got to equip people with how to withstand these things. I mean, more hurricanes are going to come. We can't prevent that. But how do we enhance their livelihoods so that it's beyond tourism? How do we provide an infrastructure by which they can help themselves in these times? I mean, I appreciate the NGOs, the military, the governments coming by, but we've just got to help them more, help themselves.
And help them for years to come. Dr. Campbell, very good to see you. Thank you very much indeed. Sean Campbell there. And you're watching Sky News Tonight. Coming up next, why the British car industry is disappointed with the government's progress on Brexit so far.